Hello and welcome to Silent Echo. Before we begin, please subscribe and like the video if you want more dark documentary investigations into real disappearances, missing person cases, and mysteries that still have no ending. On the morning of April 12, 2016, a 16-year-old girl walked through the town of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and for hours, cameras kept finding her. They saw her at school. They saw her leaving school. They saw her near a pawn shop. They saw her at a bank. They saw her sitting inside a Tim Hortons and Wendy's, looking at her phone, moving from one place to another, leaving and coming back. They saw her return to school around noon. They saw the shape of a day that investigators would later rebuild, almost minute by minute. And then, shortly after 1 p.m, the cameras stopped. Mekayla Bali was last seen at the bus depot in Yorkton. Police later determined she did not board a bus that day. Her bank account would not be used again. Her social media would go silent. Her passport was not with her. And after a morning where her movements were recorded over and over again, the girl who had been visible everywhere became visible nowhere. That is the part of the case that refuses to settle. Not that Mekayla disappeared from a dark road, not that she vanished in deep woods, not that she stepped into an empty place where no cameras existed. She disappeared after spending hours in public, in daylight, in a small city. Inside a trail of surveillance cameras and witnesses, a disappearance should become clearer when so much of the day is recorded. This one did the opposite. The more investigators reconstructed, the stranger the empty space became. Because the footage does not show panic. It does not show a chase. It does not show a visible struggle. It shows a teenager moving through ordinary places with a phone in her hand and something unseen pulling the day in a direction no one around her understood. And then the footage ends. This is the disappearance of Mekayla Bali. And the question is not only where she went, it is who or what she thought was waiting for her before the cameras lost her completely. Yorkton is not the kind of place people imagine when they picture a disappearance built from surveillance footage. It is not a giant city where someone can disappear into thousands of faces within seconds. It sits in Saskatchewan, surrounded by prairie, highways, open sky, and the quiet geometry of a small Canadian community. The distances are visible. The streets are understandable. People know the school routes. They know the restaurants. They know the bus depot. They know where a teenager might go at lunch and where she should be by the end of the school day. That is one reason the case feels so unsettling, because Mekayla did not vanish from a place no one could name. She vanished from a town that had already filmed parts of her final day. The locations were ordinary. A high school, a pawn shop, a bank, a Tim Hortons, a bus depot, a restaurant, places where people go every day and leave without becoming part of a mystery. But in Mekayla's case, those places became fixed points in a timeline that still has no final answer. Each one gives the investigation a little more shape. Each one confirms she was there. Each one shows she was moving with intention, but none of them reveal the reason. That is the danger in this case. There is a lot to look at. There is enough footage to make people believe the answer must be hidden somewhere inside it. A glance, a pause, a person in the background, a phone gesture, a direction of travel, and yet investigators have had years to examine those same fragments. The footage has produced a timeline. It has not produced Mekayla. The town itself becomes part of the tension. Yorkton is large enough for movement, but small enough that disappearance feels personal. If a 16-year-old leaves school in the morning, walks around town, returns to school around noon, then makes her way to the bus depot, someone should remember something. Someone should have seen who she met. Someone should have noticed where she went next. Someone should have been the final witness who could complete the story. But the final witness never becomes enough. The last confirmed public point does not become a doorway into a known destination. It becomes a wall. In many missing person cases, the landscape explains the uncertainty. Dense forest hides evidence. Water carries it away. Snow covers it. Desert erases it. But Mekayla's disappearance is different. The environment was human. Streets, businesses, cameras, people, schedules, receipts, phones, doors opening and closing. This should have helped. Instead, it created one of the most haunting contrasts in modern Canadian missing person history. A girl was seen again and again until she was not seen at all. Mekayla Margaret Kim Bali was 16 years old when she disappeared. She was not a symbol. She was not a character in a mystery. She was a real teenager with family, friends, routines, frustrations, hopes, private thoughts, and the complicated interior life that comes with being 16. That matters, because cases like this often get flattened by the very thing that makes them famous: the footage, the timeline, the strangeness. People watch the clips and begin to treat every movement as a clue, every pause as proof, every glance as a sign of secret knowledge. But a teenager, on camera, is still a teenager. She can be distracted without it meaning danger. She can seem calm while being anxious. She can make confusing choices without those choices explaining what happened to her. That is one of the weak spots of the case, and it has to be handled carefully. Mekayla's behavior on April 12th has been described by many as strange. Some of it is unusual. Leaving school early, moving through different businesses, trying to get money, spending time on her phone, asking about travel, reportedly asking for help with a hotel room, returning to school briefly, then ending the known timeline near a bus depot. Those details matter. But strange does not automatically mean criminal, and it does not automatically mean planned disappearance. A 16-year-old can make risky choices without understanding the scale of the risk. A 16-year-old can be influenced by someone else. A 16-year-old can believe she is controlling a situation when someone older or more experienced is actually controlling it. Those possibilities are not the same thing as facts. But they explain why this case is so difficult to close. Mekayla appears to have been making choices that morning. The question is whether those choices were hers alone. Her family would later describe the morning as ordinary. Nothing about that early part of the day seemed like the beginning of a permanent absence. That is the first fracture. The day begins inside a normal home, a normal school morning, a normal expectation that she will go to class and come back, and by evening, that expectation has broken into something her family could not repair. No goodbye that explained everything. No confirmed destination. No verified person waiting at the end of the day. Just a trail of ordinary public places and one child who never came home. The morning of April 12 began before the cameras. Mekayla was taken to school. The day should have belonged to the structure of a Tuesday. Class periods, hallways, lockers, lunch. The same routine that makes adolescence feel repetitive until the day one part of it does not repeat. At school, she did not remain long. Publicly available timelines state that she arrived in the morning and left shortly after. That small action is one of the first important decisions of the day. Not because leaving school explains the disappearance by itself. It does not. But because it shows that the day Mekayla lived and the day everyone expected her to live were already separating. One day existed in the minds of her family. She was at school. She would be picked up later. She would come home the other day existed in the movement captured by cameras. She left. She walked. She went somewhere else. From that point forward, the investigation becomes a study in parallel realities, the assumed routine, and the actual route. After leaving school, Mekayla moved through Yorkton. One of the reported early stops was a pawn shop, where she is said to have tried to pawn a ring. Then she went to a bank and withdrew a small amount of money. These details are important because they suggest preparation. But the word preparation is dangerous. Preparation for what? For travel. For a meeting. For a temporary escape. For a plan that never worked. For a plan created by someone else. The evidence does not answer that. It only shows that money mattered that morning. Not a large sum. Not enough to support a long disappearance. Not enough to vanish comfortably. But enough to show that Mekayla was trying to gather whatever resources she could. In some versions of the public timeline, friends said she had spoken about travel. There are reports that she mentioned Regina, possibly as a destination. There are reports that she told people about plans that did not match what she actually did. This is where the case becomes fragile. Because when a missing teenager mentions travel, people often turn that into a conclusion. She ran away. She planned it. She left voluntarily. But a stated plan is not always a true plan. Teenagers sometimes say things to cover what they are really doing. They sometimes repeat a story someone else told them to use. They sometimes speak in fragments because they do not want to explain. They sometimes believe a trip is temporary. They sometimes think they are meeting someone safe, and sometimes they are not. That is why the early morning matters, not because it proves one theory, but because it shows the first signs of a hidden structure beneath the ordinary day. Mekayla was doing something. She was moving towards something. But the public record still cannot tell us whether that something was an adventure, a plan, a deception, or a trap. By around mid-morning, the timeline reaches one of the most examined locations in the case, the Tim Hortons and Wendy's in Yorkton. For many people who know Mekayla's story, this is the image they remember. A teenager inside a restaurant, a phone, a booth, small movements, waiting, leaving, returning, changing position, looking at the screen again and again. It is the kind of footage that feels almost unbearable because it is so normal. There is no dramatic event, no visible attack, no obvious person pulling her away. Just a girl inside a public restaurant while time moves closer to the last confirmed hour of her life as a publicly seen person. Public timelines report that she entered the restaurant around 9:10 in the morning. She bought a drink. She sat down. At some point, she appeared to handle her phone in a way that later drew attention. Some viewers have speculated about what she was doing, changing something, checking something, trying to fix something. But the footage alone cannot confirm those interpretations. A phone in someone's hand can become a mirror for every theory. If you believe she was communicating with someone, the phone looks like evidence. If you believe she was nervous, the phone looks like anxiety. If you believe she was waiting, every glance becomes part of that wait. The disciplined view is simpler. Mekayla used her phone repeatedly that morning. Investigators have said that messaging and app-based communication created challenges in understanding the full picture. That is a major detail, because a modern teenager can leave almost no traditional phone record while still communicating constantly. No standard calls, no easy list of conversations, no simple log that says who was on the other side. In older cases, the telephone often creates a map. In this one, the phone may have created a tunnel. Communication could happen without leaving the kind of public trace investigators needed. Inside the restaurant, Mekayla's movements appear restless. She leaves and comes back. She sits in different places. She moves around the area. She seems to be watching time and waiting for something to align. Again, none of that proves danger. But it does create one of the central impressions of the case. Mekayla did not look like someone wandering randomly through a day. She looked like someone operating around a plan that was not working smoothly. At some point, according to public reporting, she sent a message to a friend indicating she needed help, and then soon after indicated she had figured it out. That short exchange has become one of the most haunting details, because it suggests a problem, but not the nature of the problem. What help did she need? Money? A ride? A room? A cover story? Someone to meet her? Someone to get her somewhere? And what did it mean when she said she had figured it out? Had she solved the problem? Had someone else answered? Had she changed plans? Had she made the decision that led to the bus depot? The text does not explain itself. It only opens a door, then closes it. Another detail from the restaurant has shaped the case for years. Mekayla reportedly approached an older woman and asked for help renting a hotel room. The woman declined. That moment is difficult to interpret, and it must not be overstated. It does not prove she planned to meet someone at a hotel. It does not prove trafficking. It does not prove a secret adult contact. But it does suggest something important. Mekayla was trying to access something a 16-year-old could not easily access alone. A hotel room requires age, payment, identification, adult cooperation. If the report is accurate, then Mekayla understood there was a barrier she could not cross by herself. So she tried to borrow an adult. That is a striking detail, not because it solves the case, because it shows a teenager improvising around adult systems. Hotels, buses, money, travel. spaces designed to regulate movement and identity. She was 16. She was old enough to move around town without immediately causing alarm, but young enough that the world still had doors she could not open. That tension may be at the center of what happened. A plan that required adult access, a destination she could not reach easily, a communication trail that has never been made fully public, and a final movement toward a bus depot, where she never boarded a bus. After leaving the Tim Hortons and Wendy's for the last time, Mekayla moved west along Broadway Street East, according to public accounts of the timeline. There is a gap after that. Not a complete gap in the day, but a gap in the camera sequence. A stretch where she is not seen on publicly discussed footage for a period of time. This is one of the most important parts of the case, because it reminds us that surveillance does not create total knowledge. It creates islands. A camera catches a doorway, a parking lot, a counter, a sidewalk from one angle. Then the person leaves the frame. Between frames, the world becomes open again. In that open space, investigators must rely on witnesses, receipts, memory, and reconstruction. Mekayla appears to have inquired about travel. She reportedly asked at the bus depot about a bus to Regina and was told a later bus would leave at 5 p.m. She did not buy a ticket. That detail matters because it creates one of the central contradictions. If she intended to leave by bus, why did she not buy a ticket? If she did not intend to leave by bus, why ask? If the bus was a cover story, who was the cover for? If she expected someone else to take her, why keep moving around bus-related spaces? There are several possible answers. She may have been checking options. She may have believed someone would meet her later. She may have planned to use the bus, but changed her mind. She may have lacked enough money. She may have been waiting for instructions. She may have wanted others to believe she was going to Regina. None of those possibilities is proven, but all of them show why the bus depot is more than a location. It is the last stage of a plan that never became visible enough to understand. Around noon, Mekayla returned to school. This is one of the details that makes the case especially strange. If she were simply running away, why return? If she were in danger, why go back into a familiar public space? If she were waiting for someone, why re-enter the school environment at all? Public timelines say she met with other students and mentioned plans connected to taking a bus or going to Regina for a vacation. Then she left again. That brief return is easy to skip in a short retelling, but it is crucial because it shows that Mekayla still had access to normal life. She could go back. She could speak to peers. She could be seen. She could remain inside the orbit of school and family. And yet she left again. That second departure feels heavier than the first. The first time she left school, the day was still forming. The second time, the pattern was already established. She had been to businesses. She had used her phone. She had sought money. She had looked into travel. She had asked for adult help with something she could not do alone. Then she returned to the one place where the normal day could have resumed. And she walked away from it again. This is the moment where the script of her day becomes impossible to read. Was she committed to leaving? Was she uncertain? Was she trying to keep an appointment? Was she buying time? Was she pretending to have a plan because she was embarrassed to say she did not? Was there someone in contact with her who expected her to be somewhere at a specific time? The evidence cannot say. It can only show that she did not stay. From there, Mekayla went toward the bus depot area. She bought lunch at the Trail Stop restaurant, which was connected to or near the bus depot. She was last seen there or at the depot in the early afternoon. The official missing persons page says she was last seen at the STC bus depot at 1:45 p.m. A 2026 RCMP update states she was last seen shortly after 1 p.m. at the Yorkton bus depot on 1st Avenue North, and that the investigation determined she did not board a bus. The difference in phrasing does not change the core fact. The bus depot is where the known trail ends. That is the final public frame. A teenager who had spent the morning moving through town, a teenager who had been captured by surveillance, a teenager who had spoken to people, a teenager who had created a confusing but traceable pattern. Then nothing. No confirmed bus ticket. No confirmed bus ride. No confirmed trip to Regina. No confirmed person she left with. No confirmed later use of her bank account. No confirmed later use of her social media. No passport with her. No confirmed recovery. That is the break. Not a dramatic event, not a visible force. Just the end of known movement. The place where all the footage and all the witness memory stops being able to carry her forward. There is a particular kind of silence that belongs to bus depots. Not complete silence. Engines, announcements, doors, people passing through. But emotionally, they are places of transition. No one is meant to stay there. A bus depot is built around leaving. People arrive because they are going somewhere else. They carry bags. They wait. They check time. They scan doors. They watch for the moment their route becomes available. That makes Mekayla's final known location feel almost symbolic. She was seen at a place designed for departure, but police say she did not depart on a bus. So what kind of departure happened? That is the question the case never answers. A bus depot creates assumptions. If someone disappears there, people imagine they boarded a bus. If they did not, the location becomes more unsettling, because it may mean the depot was not the vehicle of disappearance. It may have been the meeting point, the landmark, the cover, the place someone told her to go because it would not seem unusual. Or it may simply have been where a plan failed and something else happened after. That is why the bus depot matters so much for retention and for truth. It is not just a setting. It is the point where the known timeline stops and the interpretation begins. After that point, everything must be handled with caution. No one should state she was abducted unless the evidence proves it. No one should state she ran away unless the evidence proves it. No one should state she was trafficked unless the evidence proves it. No one should state she is alive unless the evidence proves it. No one should state she is dead unless the evidence proves it. The responsible statement is harder and more haunting. Mekayla Bali was last seen at the bus depot. She did not board a bus that day, and she has not been seen since. That is enough. It is enough because the confirmed facts are already disturbing, without exaggeration. The hours before her disappearance do not need mythology. They are already full of unanswered movement. They are already full of small decisions that do not resolve. They are already full of modern evidence that somehow fails to give a modern answer. By afternoon, the normal version of the day began to collapse. Mekayla's family expected her to be where she should have been: school, home, reachable. When her grandmother went to pick her up and learned that Mekayla had not been in class as expected, the case shifted from private routine to public concern. At first, families search in the way families do. They call, they drive, they check places that make sense. They ask people. They try to make the world return to normal before calling it an emergency. That first period can be psychologically brutal because the mind keeps offering ordinary explanations. Maybe she is with a friend. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she misunderstood the time. Maybe she is embarrassed. Maybe she will walk through the door in a few minutes and the whole thing will become a family argument, not a police case. But the minutes did not resolve. The hours did not resolve. Mekayla did not come home. That evening, she was reported missing. Police began the work of turning a confusing day into a timeline, and that is where the case became unusual. Because the same modern world that failed to protect Mekayla had recorded enough of her day to create the illusion that the answer should be close. Investigators reviewed surveillance from businesses. They interviewed witnesses. They reconstructed where she had gone. Over time, the public would see pieces of that day released in clips. Mekayla at school. Mekayla in a restaurant. Mekayla moving through ordinary spaces. Each release had the same purpose. Maybe someone would remember seeing her. Maybe someone would recognize another person in the background. Maybe someone would connect a vehicle, a conversation, a bus route, a face, or a moment. The case generated tips, many tips. Years later, our CMP would say more than 1,000 tips had been received and investigated. That number is important because it shows the scale of continued effort. It also shows the difficulty. 1,000 pieces of information can sound like progress. But if none of them locates the missing person, the number begins to represent the size of the uncertainty. Every tip must be checked. Every sighting must be tested. Every possible lead consumes time. And still, Mekayla remains missing. Her case eventually moved into the RCMP Historical Case Unit. That does not mean the case is forgotten. It means the investigation has entered the long life of unresolved disappearance, the stage where time becomes both enemy and tool. Witness memories fade, people move, businesses close, camera systems are replaced, phones vanish, accounts become inaccessible. But time can also change people. Someone who was afraid in 2016 may not be afraid now. Someone who thought a detail was meaningless may realize it mattered. Someone who heard something secondhand may decide to come forward. That is why the RCMP continues to ask for information. The public appeal is not just procedural. It is an acknowledgement that some cases can turn on a detail that seemed too small to carry weight at the time. A person seen near the depot, a vehicle parked in a certain place, a message sent before the disappearance, a name mentioned casually, a reason Mekayla believed she needed to leave. In a case like this, the missing piece may not look dramatic. It may be ordinary. That is the cruelty of it. The answer to a decade-long mystery could be hidden in something someone dismissed as nothing. The strongest evidence in Mekayla's case is also the most frustrating: the surveillance footage. It gives the story its shape, it gives viewers something to see. It creates an unusual level of public familiarity with the final known morning. But footage has limits. A camera records only what passes in front of it. It cannot record motive. It cannot record pressure. It cannot record a conversation happening through an app. It cannot show what a teenager believes is about to happen unless the result becomes visible. In Mekayla's case, the cameras show movement. They do not show the meaning of that movement. This is where many retellings become too confident. They say she was clearly waiting, clearly nervous, clearly meeting someone, clearly being watched, clearly planning to run away. But clarity is exactly what the case lacks. The footage can support questions. It cannot carry conclusions alone. Still, certain patterns are difficult to ignore. She moved repeatedly. She returned to places. She used her phone frequently. She sought money. She inquired about travel. She reportedly tried to get help securing a hotel room. She told peers about travel plans. She ended at a bus depot but did not board a bus. Those facts create a cluster. A cluster is not proof of one theory, but it tells us the day was not random. Something was organizing it. The unknown is what? Was it a personal plan that collapsed? Was it a person communicating with her? Was it a secret trip she believed would be temporary? Was it an attempt to meet someone from outside her normal life? Was it a desire to leave home that intersected with danger? Was it an opportunistic crime after she had already made herself vulnerable? The footage cannot choose between those possibilities. It only makes each of them feel close enough to be unsettling. That is why Mekayla's case endures, because the viewer is placed in the same position as investigators. You can see her, you can follow her, you can almost predict where she should go next. Then, the trail disappears. One of the strongest theories in the case is that Mekayla intended to leave Yorkton voluntarily, at least temporarily. There are reasons this theory exists. She left school, she tried to gather money, she asked about a bus, she reportedly spoke about Regina, she had a backpack, she moved through the day in ways that suggest intention. If someone stopped the analysis there, runaway might seem like the simplest explanation. But the theory has limits. A voluntary departure explains the beginning of the day better than it explains the end of the case. It may explain why she left school. It may explain the bus depot. It may explain why she told some people she was going somewhere. But it does not explain why she has remained missing for years. It does not explain why there has been no verified later use of her bank account. It does not explain the reported absence of confirmed social media use. It does not explain the passport issue. It does not explain why a 16-year-old with limited money could disappear permanently without leaving a clearer trace. It is possible to leave voluntarily and then encounter harm. It is possible to run toward someone and be taken advantage of. It is possible to plan a short absence and lose control almost immediately. That is the key distinction. Voluntary departure does not equal safe departure. A teenager can make the first move by choice and still become a victim afterward. For Mekayla, the public evidence suggests she may have been trying to go somewhere or meet someone. But the evidence does not show that she successfully created a new life. That gap weakens the simple runaway explanation. If she left to begin again, where is the proof of that life? If she left for a trip, where did the trip end? If she intended to return, what stopped her? If she never intended to return, how did she survive without the normal traces of survival? That is why the theory remains possible, but incomplete. It explains motion. It does not explain disappearance. Another theory focuses on online communication. This is one of the most troubling possibilities because it fits the shape of the day without requiring a visible accomplice in every frame. A person does not need to stand beside someone to influence them. They can be on a screen. They can be in messages. They can create urgency. They can create secrecy. They can instruct. They can flatter. They can pressure. They can promise travel, money, affection, escape, or a new identity. For a teenager especially, one navigating private emotional struggles, an unseen contact can become more powerful than the people physically present around her. Public reporting has long raised questions about who Mekayla may have been communicating with before or during the day she vanished. Investigators have indicated that app-based communication made the case more difficult. That is a crucial, modern detail, because a phone can be central to a disappearance without leaving a simple record. A standard phone bill may not show app messages. A platform may not preserve content in a way that is easily accessible. Accounts may be private. Names may be false. People may present themselves as someone they are not. This theory can explain several things. It can explain why Mekayla seemed to be using her phone so often. It can explain why she may have moved around while waiting. It can explain the bus depot if she expected to meet someone or leave town. It can explain the hotel room question if someone had suggested a meeting place or overnight stay. But it also has limits. The public does not have confirmed evidence identifying such a person. No known suspect has been publicly named as the person who communicated with her and took her. No message has been publicly released that proves a lure. That means the online contact theory must remain a theory, a strong one, a plausible one, but not a proven one. The danger is that people fill in the missing person on the other side of the screen with whatever image fits their fear. A predator, a trafficker, an older romantic contact, a peer, a fake identity, a stranger. Any of these might be possible in a broad sense, but responsible storytelling cannot choose one without evidence. What can be said is this: Mekayla's phone activity matters, her apparent need for help matters, her travel-related movements matter. And the possibility that an unseen person was influencing the day remains one of the most important unresolved questions in the case. The trafficking theory has been discussed in public for years, including by people close to Mekayla's story. It is understandable why the theory appears. A teenage girl disappears after apparently trying to arrange travel. She may have been communicating with unknown people. She was last seen near a bus depot. No body has been found. No confirmed, later life has been established. In many cases, families hold on to trafficking as a possibility because it preserves a chance that the missing person could still be alive. That hope matters. It should not be mocked. It should not be dismissed cruelly, but it also should not be treated as proven fact without evidence. Human trafficking is real. Teenagers can be groomed. Vulnerable youth can be targeted. Travel hubs can be used. Online communication can play a role. All of that is true. But the existence of trafficking as a real phenomenon does not automatically prove it happened in this case. For Mekayla, the trafficking theory explains the absence of a body and the possibility of movement beyond Yorkton. It could also explain why a teenager might be coached to behave normally while making travel arrangements. But it struggles with the same problem as other theories. There is no publicly confirmed sighting or evidence placing Mekayla in a trafficking network after April 12. No confirmed later communication. No recovered records that prove she was taken for that purpose. No official statement identifying trafficking as the proven outcome. So the theory remains possible, emotionally powerful, but unconfirmed. The disciplined approach is to keep it in the frame without letting it dominate the story. Because if a theory becomes too dramatic, it can obscure simpler possibilities. And if it becomes too comforting, it can hide the fact that no one knows whether Mekayla survived beyond that day. That is one of the hardest truths in missing child cases. Hope and evidence are not always aligned. Families need hope to continue. Investigators need evidence to proceed. A documentary has to respect both. Another possibility is that Mekayla encountered someone locally after leaving the bus depot area. This theory does not require a long-distance network. It does not require that she successfully boarded a vehicle for another city. It does not require an elaborate plan. It only requires a vulnerable window after the last confirmed sighting. A teenager alone, possibly waiting, possibly expecting someone, possibly uncertain, possibly carrying a backpack, possibly with limited money, and a person who recognized opportunity. This theory can explain why the public trail ends in Yorkton. It can explain why she did not board a bus. It can explain why no later confirmed digital or financial trace appears. It can also fit the fact that many disappearances are not the result of complex conspiracies. They are the result of a short window, a bad encounter, and someone able to conceal what happened. But this theory also has limits. If harm occurred locally, where is the physical evidence? Where was she taken? Who saw the vehicle? Who noticed the person? How did a crime occur in the early afternoon without producing a witness strong enough to solve the case? The answer may be that the event happened quickly or outside camera coverage. Or it may be that someone did see something but never understood its significance. Or it may be that the person involved was known enough to her that the moment did not look suspicious. This is why investigators continue to request even small tips. A detail does not need to look like a crime to matter. A teenager getting into a vehicle might not alarm anyone if she does not seem frightened. A conversation outside a depot might look ordinary. A person walking beside her might appear to be a friend. A car leaving a parking lot might blend into every other car in town. The most haunting crimes are sometimes hidden not by darkness, but by normality. If Mekayla left with someone willingly, at least at first, the last moments before danger may not have looked like danger at all. That possibility is one reason the case is so painful, because the final answer may not be visible in the footage. It may be just beyond it, in a parking lot, on a sidewalk, inside a vehicle, in a brief exchange no camera captured. There is also the possibility of accidental harm. This is generally weaker than the other major theories, but it has to be considered because disappearances sometimes result from events no one witnesses: a fall, exposure, a medical issue, an attempt to hide or wait somewhere unsafe, a movement into an isolated area after leaving the known route. For Mekayla, this theory has problems. She disappeared from an urban setting in daylight. She was not last seen entering wilderness. Searches and public attention followed. If she had suffered an accident nearby, one might expect something to be found eventually. Her backpack, clothing, a phone, remains, some physical trace. The absence of such trace makes a simple accident difficult to sustain, but not impossible in the broadest sense. People have been found in places searched before. Urban edges can hide more than expected. Water, abandoned structures, private property, and overlooked spaces can delay discovery for years. Still, in this case, the accident theory does not connect as well to the morning behavior. It does not explain the bus depot, the phone activity, the travel inquiries, or the hotel room detail. It could only explain what happened after those events. So it is not a theory of the day, it is a theory of the aftermath. That distinction matters. A good explanation should account for both the buildup and the disappearance. Accident explains disappearance in a general sense. It does not explain why Mekayla moved through that day the way she did. That is why it remains less persuasive than theories involving planned movement, a meeting, or another person. But even weak theories serve a purpose. They remind us not to lock onto one conclusion too soon, because the case remains open, and open cases punish certainty. One of the most misunderstood parts of Mekayla's disappearance is the absence of confirmed evidence after she vanished. To viewers, that absence can feel like proof of something elaborate. How can a person vanish in the modern world without using a bank account, phone, passport, or social media? The question is fair, but the answer is complicated. A person can disappear because they are no longer alive. A person can disappear because they are being controlled. A person can disappear because they are using a different identity or someone else's resources. A person can disappear because the records exist but have not been publicly linked. A person can disappear because the digital systems people trust are incomplete. Modern life creates traces, but it does not create total certainty. Still, Mekayla's silence is profound. Her bank account reportedly saw no later use. Her social media did not provide a public answer. Police and family appeals continued for years. The official case remains active. That kind of silence changes how the earlier behavior is interpreted. If she had returned after a few days, the morning would be remembered as a frightening runaway episode. If she had contacted someone weeks later, the bus depot would be the starting point of a different life. If evidence had been found, the footage would be read as the prelude to a known tragedy. But none of those things happened, so the footage remained suspended. Every frame still asks what the next frame should have been. That is, the emotional center of the case. A timeline without a destination. In 2019, police released additional surveillance footage in the hope that public attention might generate leads. This was a significant decision. Investigators do not release footage like that casually. They do it when recognition might matter, when someone in the background might be identified, when a location might spark memory, when a viewer might notice something that gives police a new direction. For the public, the footage made the case feel closer. People could watch Mekayla move through that day. They could see her posture, her pace, her apparent waiting, her returns, her phone. But public footage also creates a second investigation outside law enforcement. Thousands of viewers become analysts, some careful, some reckless, some compassionate, some convinced they have solved everything from a gesture. This can help a case when it produces real tips. It can harm a case when speculation overwhelms evidence. Mekayla's case has suffered from that tension. There are many theories online, many claims, many interpretations of body language, many attempts to identify background figures. But body language is not proof. A person looking anxious is not proof of why. A person looking calm is not proof of safety. A person waiting is not proof of who they are waiting for. A person using a phone is not proof of what the messages say. The footage must be treated as evidence of location and movement first, meaning second, and only when meaning can be supported. That is the standard that keeps a documentary grounded. The camera shows Mekayla was there. The camera does not show the full reason. The investigation into Mekayla's disappearance has continued across years because the case has never settled into a single answer. There are no confirmed remains, no confirmed later life, no public arrest, no closed explanation. RCMP has said more than 1,000 tips have been investigated. The case remains with major crimes and historical case investigators. In 2026, marking 10 years since the disappearance, Saskatchewan RCMP again asked the public for information, emphasizing that it is never too late to come forward. That phrase matters. It suggests investigators still believe someone outside the police may hold a missing piece, not necessarily the whole story, maybe just one detail, a name, a message, a vehicle, a sighting, a conversation, a rumor that seemed unimportant, a place someone mentioned, a person who changed behavior after April 12. Cold cases often move when someone decides that silence has lasted long enough. The family statement in that 10th year carried the weight of time. A decade is long enough for a missing child to become an adult in imagination, long enough for siblings to grow up around an absence, long enough for a mother to replay one ordinary morning so many times that ordinary becomes unbearable. But a decade is not long enough to make the question go away. The public may move from case to case. The algorithm may rediscover a disappearance every few years. Videos may rise and fade. But families live in the permanent version of the story. They do not get the relief of moving on to the next mystery. That is why every responsible telling of the case has to return to the human center. Mekayla is not the girl in the Tim Hortons footage. She is not the mystery at the bus depot. She is not a theory about trafficking or online grooming or runaway plans. She is a missing person. And somewhere, in someone's memory, phone past or conscience, there may still be a piece of information that can help locate her. The strongest way to understand this case is not as a riddle, but as a sequence of doors. The first door is school. She enters the expected day, then leaves it. The second door is money. She tries to gather what little she can. The third door is the restaurant. She waits, moves, communicates, tries to solve something. The fourth door is travel. She asks about buses and speaks of leaving. The fifth door is adulthood, a hotel room, an adult barrier, a request for help. The sixth door is school again, a chance to return to the normal day. She does not take it. The seventh door is the bus depot, the final known public point. And beyond that, no door has ever been confirmed. That structure is what makes the case so compelling. It feels like she was moving from one threshold to another, trying to cross into something. But every threshold only reveals the next one, not the destination. For a filmmaker, this is powerful. For a family, it is agony. Because if you can see the route, you feel you should be able to reach the end. If you can see the morning, you feel the afternoon should be recoverable. If you can watch her sit in a restaurant, you feel she cannot be far away. But she is. Not physically necessarily, not in distance, but in evidence. She is beyond the last confirmed point. And no one has been able to pull her back from that gap. That is why the case remains so disturbing. It does not begin in chaos, it begins in visibility. There is another layer to the story that must be handled with care: the emotional state of a missing person before they disappear. In many cases involving teenagers, people search for signs. Were they unhappy? Were they planning to leave? Were they speaking to someone? Did they act differently? Those questions can be relevant, but they can also become unfair. A teenager does not need to be perfectly happy to deserve protection. A teenager can be secretive without inviting harm. A teenager can make choices adults do not understand without becoming responsible for whatever happened next. If Mekayla was planning something, that still does not tell us who may have exploited that plan. If she wanted to leave town, that still does not explain why she vanished completely. If she trusted someone, that still does not mean that trust was safe. This is a vital point for the script and for the ethics of the story. The mystery should not become blame. It should not reduce her to bad decisions. It should not turn ordinary teenage vulnerability into a verdict. The correct tension is different. Mekayla may have been trying to control her day, but something happened that placed her beyond her own control. That is where the fear lives, not in the idea that she made choices, but in the possibility that those choices led to someone or something she could not escape. There is no public evidence proving exactly when control shifted. If it shifted at all, that is the enduring question hidden inside the timeline. Where does Mekayla's plan end, and where does someone else's begin? The city of Yorkton on that day becomes a map of uncertainty. At the school, people knew her. At the bank, the transaction was ordinary. At the restaurant, she was visible. At the bus depot, she was in a public travel space. None of these places seem like the edge of the world. But disappearances do not always happen at the visible edge. Sometimes the edge is social, a secret contact, a private message, a person no one else knows, a plan not shared with family, a ride accepted because it feels familiar enough, a location chosen because it seems public enough to be safe. This is why cases like Mekayla's are so difficult. The dangerous space may not have been a physical location. It may have been the hidden part of her life that cameras could not see. That hidden part could be innocent. It could be ordinary teenage privacy, or it could contain the answer. Investigators have to sort that without turning every private detail into public spectacle. The public wants the full story. Families deserve dignity. The missing person deserves to be more than their last day. A strong documentary must walk that line. It can examine the hidden possibilities. It cannot pretend to know what the hidden space contained. The day after Mekayla disappeared, the world did not transform for everyone else. People still went to work. Students went to school. Buses still ran. Restaurants opened. Cameras kept recording ordinary life. That is one of the most haunting facts of any disappearance. For everyone outside the immediate circle, the world continues. For the family, time stops. The moment of absence becomes permanent. Every day after April 12 becomes divided from every day before it. The missing person does not age in the evidence. She remains 16. In the footage, in the still frames, in the clothing description, in the last known location. But the world around the case ages. Technology changes. People change phones. Old platforms disappear. Buildings change owners. Witnesses forget exact times. New investigators inherit old files. The public rediscovers the case in waves. A podcast, a news feature, a documentary, a YouTube video, a police anniversary release. Each wave brings attention. Attention can generate tips. But attention can also create noise. That is why the 10th year appeal matters. It is not just remembrance. It is a reminder that the case is still open in the only way that matters. Police are still asking. Family is still waiting. And the last known fact is still the same. Mekayla was seen at the bus depot. She did not board a bus. She has not been found. The theories continue because the evidence stops. That is how unresolved cases work. Where proof ends, imagination begins. But not all imagination is equal. Some theories are grounded in the timeline. Some are built almost entirely from fear. A grounded theory must explain the morning movement, the phone, the travel inquiries, the bus depot, the silence afterward, and the lack of confirmed recovery. No theory does this perfectly. The planned meeting theory explains much of the morning, but lacks a confirmed person. The runaway theory explains some choices, but struggles with long-term silence. The trafficking theory explains absence and possible survival, but lacks public confirmation. The local harm theory explains the abrupt end, but lacks a known scene. The accident theory explains disappearance in a broad sense, but does not fit the organized behavior as well. That is why the case remains open. Not because there are no theories, because every theory leaves something behind. A good script should not pretend otherwise. The tension comes from the failure of each explanation to complete the shape. That is more powerful than fake certainty, because viewers can feel the problem. They can follow the timeline and see why one answer almost works, then see where it breaks. That creates real retention, not cheap cliffhangers, not exaggerated danger, a disciplined mystery where every answer is tested and none survives intact. For Mekayla, the most responsible conclusion may be the simplest. She appears to have been trying to get somewhere, or to someone, but the public record does not prove where, who, or why. And after the bus depot, the trail disappears. The bus depot is the center of the case, because it does something that most last known locations do not do. It offers an answer and removes it at the same time. If Mekayla had been seen walking into an empty field, the mystery would point outward into the land. If she had been seen getting into a known vehicle, the mystery would point toward the person driving it. If she had been seen entering a building and never leaving, the mystery would point into that building. But a bus depot is different. It is a place built to scatter people. Everyone there is between places. Everyone has a reason to leave. Everyone is near transportation. That makes it hard to know whether the location was part of her plan or only part of the cover. Mekayla reportedly asked about a bus. Police say she did not board one. Those two facts sit beside each other like a locked door. If she asked about the bus because she really wanted to take it, something changed before departure. If she asked because someone told her to ask, the bus becomes a decoy. If she asked because she was unsure what to do next, the depot becomes a place of hesitation. If she asked because she wanted people to believe she had gone to Regina, it becomes part of a false trail. Every option changes the story. None can be confirmed. This is why the title of the case could almost be The Missing Bus. Not because a vehicle vanished, because the expected next step never happened. A girl at a bus depot should leave by bus. Mekayla did not, so the disappearance must have happened by another route. A ride, a walk, a meeting, a movement no camera preserved. A decision made after the public trail ran out. That creates the most important practical question in the entire case. What exits were available from the depot area? Not only doors, social exits. Who could approach her without frightening her? Who could offer a ride that felt safer or faster than waiting until 5? Who knew she was there? Who knew she might be trying to leave? Who knew she had little money and needed adult help? The answer may be a person, or it may be no one identifiable from the public record. But the shape of the day suggests that the depot was not a random endpoint. It was where several themes converged: travel, waiting, money, a backpack, a phone, a plan that never came into view, and then absence. This is why the case remains so strong for a documentary audience. It has a final location that everyone understands, but the expected action connected to that location never happens. That is the hook. Not simply that she vanished. That she vanished from a place where the next step should have been recorded, remembered, or ticketed. Instead, the system that should have carried her forward says she never used it. There is another detail that has surfaced in public reporting and has drawn attention over the years. A possible person of interest connected to the bus depot or restaurant area. Descriptions circulated of a man with a stocky build, dark hair, muscular arms, and a prominent tattoo on his forearm. According to public accounts, police sought information about him, and he later came forward and was questioned. This is the kind of detail that sounds like it should become the answer. A distinctive tattoo, a possible connection to the last known area, a person who can be described. In a fictional version of the story, that would be the moment where everything narrows. But real investigations do not always move that cleanly. The public record does not show that this lead solved the case. No charge has been announced against that man in relation to Mekayla's disappearance. No official public conclusion has turned that description into the final explanation. That means the detail has to remain in the script as a lead, not a verdict. It is important because it shows investigators were not only looking at Mekayla's actions, they were looking at people around her. They were trying to identify who may have interacted with her in the final area. But it is not enough to build an accusation. That balance is essential. True crime often becomes reckless at this point. A descriptive lead becomes a villain. A person in the background becomes a suspect in the public imagination. A vague timeline becomes proof. That is not documentary work. The better question is not whether one public lead is definitely the answer. The better question is what that lead reveals about the investigation itself. Police were trying to understand who Mekayla may have been with or near after the restaurant and depot. They were trying to fill the human gap, because a disappearance like this rarely ends in pure empty space. Someone may have seen her, someone may have spoken to her, someone may have picked her up, someone may have been waiting, or someone may have crossed her path at exactly the wrong moment. The case has never publicly identified that person in a way that closes the file. So the human gap remains. A possible person, a possible interaction, a possible direction. No confirmed ending. The investigation also shows how quickly a modern missing person case becomes a race against disappearing evidence. On April 12, 2016, the first problem was finding Mekayla. Within days, the problem became understanding her day. Within weeks, it became preserving what could still be preserved. Surveillance footage can be overwritten, witnesses can forget, phones can become inaccessible. Digital accounts can resist reconstruction. Businesses can only provide what they still have. In a small community, word spreads quickly, but memory can become contaminated just as quickly. People hear what others heard. They begin to remember details through the lens of the case. A sighting that seemed certain becomes less certain. A person who looked familiar becomes someone else. A vehicle becomes a different color. A time becomes approximate. This is why the early surveillance footage is so valuable. It fixes pieces of the day before memory can change them. It shows that Mekayla was at certain places. It shows that she moved in certain directions. It confirms the broad outline of the morning. But even fixed evidence can be incomplete. A camera can tell investigators when someone entered a restaurant. It cannot tell them what was typed on a phone. A camera can show someone leaving a school. It cannot tell them what was promised before she left. A camera can show a person in a public place. It cannot tell them what private fear or excitement or confusion was inside that person. That is why modern cases can feel more frustrating than older ones. Older cases lack evidence. Modern cases often have evidence that stops 1 inch short of meaning. Mekayla's case is exactly that. A recorded day without a recorded answer. The phone is one of the darkest objects in the story, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it does not. It appears constantly in the logic of the day. Mekayla used it. She seemed to rely on it. She may have been communicating through apps. She may have been making arrangements. She may have been seeking help. But the public does not have a full transparent map of those communications. That absence creates enormous interpretive pressure. People want the phone to explain everything. They want a message, a username, a plan, a threat, a meeting point, a person. And perhaps investigators know more than has been released. That is possible. Police often hold back information in active investigations. But from the public position, the phone is less an answer than a shadow. It tells us that a private world existed beside the public footage. The two worlds overlap, but they do not fully merge. On camera, Mekayla moves through Yorkton. On the phone, something else may have been happening. A conversation, a plan, a disagreement, an instruction, a reassurance, a manipulation. Or ordinary teenage contact that had nothing to do with the disappearance. No responsible storyteller can claim certainty without the content. But the pattern of the day makes the private communication impossible to ignore. It is the invisible thread running through the visible timeline. And if the answer is ever found, it may come from that thread. A message remembered, an account recovered, a person who knows what was said, a device or data source that connects the morning to someone else. Until then, the phone remains the object that should explain the case and does not. The searches that followed added another layer of frustration. There were public appeals. There were expanded alerts. There were investigative units. There were ground searches, including later searches in areas near the school. There were interviews. There were reviews of hundreds of hours of surveillance. There were tips from across the country, but nothing produced a confirmed location. No recovery. No verified life elsewhere. No proof of what happened after the bus depot. That is different from a case where investigators have no starting point. Here, they had many starting points. They had a school, they had businesses, they had camera angles, they had witness interactions, they had a final public area. But each starting point eventually ran into the same wall. It could explain where she had been, not where she went. This is the reason the case remains so strong as a long-form story. Every block of the timeline gives the audience a new piece, and every new piece seems as if it should solve something. Then it fails. The bank does not solve it. The restaurant does not solve it. The hotel room question does not solve it. The bus inquiry does not solve it. The last sighting does not solve it. Even the surveillance does not solve it. The entire documentary becomes an experience of almost reaching an answer. That is high retention when handled honestly. The viewer stays not because of artificial twists, but because the real case keeps presenting doors that open into more questions. A weaker script would exaggerate the mystery by suggesting impossible forces. A stronger script does the opposite. It shows that the ordinary explanation is still missing. The official facts are enough. A child left school. A child moved through town. A child asked about travel. A child did not board the bus. A child vanished. That sequence does not need supernatural language. It is disturbing because it is possible, because it happens in the world we actually live in, because cameras can watch a person for hours and still fail at the only moment that matters. There is also a broader social reality behind the case. Teenagers live partly in spaces adults can see and partly in spaces adults cannot. School is visible. Home is visible. A bank camera is visible. A restaurant camera is visible. But conversations inside apps may not be visible. Emotional dependency may not be visible. A secret friendship may not be visible. A feeling of wanting to leave may not be visible. That hidden half of adolescent life is not automatically dangerous. Most of it is normal. But when something goes wrong, it becomes the area investigators most urgently need to understand. In Mekayla's case, the visible half of the day is unusually well documented. The hidden half is not. That imbalance is the case. It is why people keep returning to the footage. They are trying to see the hidden half inside the visible one. They are trying to read a message from a glance. They are trying to hear a conversation through body language. They are trying to identify the person who may not be in the frame at all. That effort is understandable. But it also shows the limits of public investigation. Some answers cannot be extracted from a video no matter how long people stare at it. Some answers require testimony, records, confession, a located object, a recovered person, a new witness. Until one of those appears, the footage remains what it has always been, a record of everything before the unknown, not the unknown itself. There is a temptation to ask why Mekayla did not simply tell someone. Why not tell a friend exactly where she was going? Why not ask a trusted adult for help? Why not stay at school? Why not go home? Those questions are natural. They are also shaped by hindsight. Hindsight knows she disappears. Mekayla did not. If she believed she was going on a trip, she may not have understood she was entering danger. If she believed she was meeting someone she trusted, she may not have understood she needed protection. If she was trying to keep a secret, she may have thought secrecy was temporary. If she was embarrassed or afraid of being stopped, she may have avoided the very adults who could have interrupted the chain of events. That is why it is unfair to treat her choices as obvious mistakes. They only look obvious because we know the ending. She did not. To her, the day may have felt stressful, exciting, urgent, confusing, or controlled by a plan she thought she could manage. To everyone else now, it looks like the approach to a cliff. That is one of the tragedies of the case. The danger is visible only after the disappearance. At the time, it may have looked like a teenager skipping school and making questionable plans, not like the beginning of a decade-long missing persons case. The final known description also carries weight. Mekayla was 16. She had blue eyes and blonde hair. She was about 5'2". She was wearing glasses. MissingKids.ca notes that she was carrying a blue plaid backpack. Official records described clothing that included a maroon coat, maroon boots, dark leggings, a turquoise top, and an infinity scarf. These details are practical. They help identify a missing child. But in a long unsolved case, they become something else too. They freeze her at the threshold of disappearance. The backpack becomes more than a backpack. It becomes the object she may have carried into whatever happened next. The glasses become more than glasses. They become part of the last image people are asked to remember. The clothing becomes more than clothing. It becomes a color code for absence. This is why missing person posters are so powerful and so painful. They turn ordinary details into evidence. Height, weight, hair, eyes, clothing. Last seen. A person reduced to what someone might recognize. But Mekayla was more than the identifiers on a poster. That is important to say in the script, because long-form mystery can accidentally consume the person inside the mystery. The facts matter, because they may bring her home. The humanity matters, because she is not only a case. She is someone whose life was interrupted at 16, whose family still asks the public to speak if they know anything, and whose story remains unfinished because the truth has not been returned. A major weakness in this case for storytelling is that there is no confirmed crime scene, no abandoned car, no recovered body, no weapon, no last phone call with a clear emergency, no single object that says this is what happened. For some videos, that would be a problem. For this one, it becomes the point. The evidence, artifact, is the footage itself. The case is built around a visible timeline that fails at the end. That means the script should not pretend there is a stronger physical artifact than there is. It should lean into the central contradiction. She was heavily traceable until she was completely untraceable. That is the artifact. A sequence of public sightings, a disappearance in the blind spot after them. For a thumbnail, that means the strongest image is not a generic missing poster. It is a girl-shaped absence in a bus depot. An empty bench, a CCTV frame, a backpack left implied but not found, a bus door open with no boarding. For a title, the strongest language is not simply disappeared. It is caught on camera all morning, then vanished. That is the hook, because it expresses the paradox. The case does not need to sound bigger than it is. It needs to sound exactly as strange as it is. A teenager, on camera, a bus she never boarded, a silence that has lasted for years. This is also why the opening 30 seconds must not begin with biography. It must begin with the camera sequence. The viewer needs to understand immediately that this is an evidence-driven case. The hook is not only a missing girl. The hook is that the evidence almost follows her to the end, then stops. If the opening begins too softly, the viewer may think this is another general missing person story. But if the opening begins with the cameras, the bus depot, and the fact that she did not board a bus, the audience understands the puzzle instantly. That is how the story should be held. Every return to the timeline should sharpen the same question: what was she moving toward? And who knew she was coming? The more time passes, the more the case becomes a question of memory. Not only official memory, public memory. Someone may remember a teenage girl at the depot. Someone may remember a vehicle idling nearby. Someone may remember a conversation at a restaurant. Someone may remember a person who spoke about Mekayla later. Someone may remember a rumor from 2016 that never seemed important enough to call in. In many cold cases, people assume that if they did not come forward immediately, it is too late. The RCMP has said the opposite. It is not too late. A decade can change loyalties. It can change fear. It can change guilt. It can change what a person is willing to admit. That is why public attention still matters, not because internet speculation solves cases by itself, but because attention can reach the one person who knows something and has stayed silent. This is the ethical reason to make the video, not to turn Mekayla into content, not to sensationalize a teenager's private life, but to keep the official question alive in a way that reaches people who may have information. That is the standard. Every theory should serve that standard. Every dramatic line should remain grounded in that standard. Every unanswered question should point back to the possibility that someone still knows. Because if the answer exists outside the file, it may take public pressure for it to move, and if the answer is hidden in a memory, that memory may need to be awakened by seeing the case again. The story of Mekayla Bali is often described as bizarre. That word is understandable, but it can be misleading. Bizarre can make the case feel strange for entertainment, but the deeper truth is more serious. Her final known day was not bizarre. In every moment, it was ordinary moment after ordinary moment, placed in an order no one can explain. That is different. The school was ordinary. The bank was ordinary. The restaurant was ordinary. The bus depot was ordinary. The phone was ordinary. A teenager wanting freedom or privacy or travel is ordinary. But when those ordinary parts are assembled into this particular sequence, the result becomes deeply abnormal. That is what makes the case frightening without cheap horror. It suggests that danger can hide inside normal systems. A school day, a fast food restaurant, a phone screen, a public depot, a bus schedule. Nothing looks like a threshold until someone crosses it and never returns. That is the silent echo version of this story. Not a monster in the frame, not a conspiracy presented as fact, not a supernatural gap, a real young person moving through a real town, leaving behind a record that should have been enough, but was not. The final absence is the strongest image. After all the cameras, no camera sees the ending. After all the movement, no one confirms the destination. After all the theories, no theory closes the file. After all the tips, the family is still waiting. That is why the case still matters. Because somewhere after the bus depot, the truth exists. Maybe in a place, maybe in a person, maybe in a record, maybe in a memory, but it has not yet reached the people who need it most. There is one image that stays after studying the case. Not one frame exactly, more like an arrangement of frames. A teenager in a public place, looking at her phone. A teenager leaving and coming back. A teenager near the machinery of travel. A teenager who seems close enough to save because she is still in daylight, still indoors, still visible, still surrounded by ordinary life. That is what makes the case hurt. She does not look unreachable. She looks like someone you could call out to, someone who might turn around. someone who might be interrupted before making the next choice. But the past does not allow intervention. The footage only lets us watch, and watching is not the same as knowing. For the viewer, the frustration is intellectual. For her family, it is permanent. Every ordinary action in the footage becomes loaded with unbearable significance. The drink she bought, the seat she chose, the person she approached, the bus she did not board, the door she used, the direction she walked. In a solved case, these details become chapters. In an unsolved case, they become traps, because each one feels like it should contain the answer, and none of them does. That is why Mekayla Bali remains one of the most haunting modern disappearance cases in Canada. Not because there is no evidence, because there is so much evidence of the wrong kind. Evidence that shows where she was. Evidence that shows what she did. Evidence that proves she existed inside a normal day, but not evidence that shows what happened when the day stopped being normal. As of the latest public appeals, the investigation remains active. Saskatchewan RCMP continues to request information. The official missing person record remains in place. MissingKids.ca still lists her missing from Yorkton, noting that she was last seen at the STC bus depot carrying a blue plaid backpack and wearing eyeglasses. Canada's Missing states that she went to school in the morning, left shortly after arriving, visited several businesses, returned to school around noon, bought lunch at the restaurant in the bus depot, did not board a bus, and left the bus depot in the early afternoon. Those official words are restrained. They do not dramatize. They do not speculate, but inside them is the entire mystery. She left shortly after arriving. She went to several businesses. She returned. She bought lunch. She did not get on a bus. She left. She has not been seen since. A disappearance written in ordinary verbs. Left, went, returned, bought, did not board, left. That is the cold power of this case. Nothing in that sequence sounds impossible until the ending never arrives. And maybe that is why it stays with people. Because the danger does not announce itself. It hides inside normal movement. It hides inside a Tuesday. It hides inside a teenager's private plan. It hides inside a restaurant booth and a phone screen and a bus schedule. It hides until the final confirmed moment passes and the world realizes no one knows where she went. The enduring question is not just what happened to Mekayla Bali. It is what happened in the invisible space between the last ordinary image and the first hour. No one could find her. Was she meeting someone? Was she trying to leave? Was she deceived? Was she harmed? Was she taken somewhere beyond Yorkton? Did someone see her after the depot and not realize that memory was the last piece of a national mystery? Some cases end because evidence is found. Some end because someone confesses. Some end because remains are recovered and the location tells the story. Mekayla's has not ended. It remains a sequence, suspended in daylight. A girl walking through known places. A town full of cameras. A bus depot without a bus ride. And 10 years of silence after a morning that should have explained itself. If you have information about Mekayla Bali, contact Saskatchewan RNCP or Crime Stoppers through the official channels. If you only know the case from online theories, remember that behind every frame of footage is a real person and a family, still waiting for fact, not speculation. And if you have followed the timeline and see something others may have missed, keep the discussion grounded in evidence. That is the only way a mystery like this can be treated with the seriousness it deserves. Thank you for watching Silent Echo. If this investigation held your attention, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps more viewers find these cases, and it helps keep real, unresolved disappearances in public memory. Leave your thoughts in the comments, stay respectful, stay careful with the facts, and stay with us for the next investigation.